Hello and welcome back everyone. In House of the Dragon looks like it just introduced a really big character from the books in a recent episode called the Shepherd and Helena's latest dragon dream, which involves his character. It's probably one of the worst dragon dreams that she would have seen on the show. In terms of consequences, the way things play out within the story, the Shepherd serves a similar role as the High Sparrow did during the original Game of Thrones series, the comeuppance of the nobles just in general, in this case the Greens, because they're in power in King's Landing. But also because Rhaenyra and the Blacks are part of the nobility. Even though right now it seems like it's just the Greens. Who kind of forgot about the small folk? The Blacks also wind up suffering a lot of consequences of that. So all the Targaryens on both sides of the family, it winds up being bad for everyone. So we'll break it all down in what Helena's dragon dream means here. During episode 6, a lot of you were asking if this man here who gets his hand chopped off by the Kingsguard while he tries to grab Alicent, is the Shepherd from the books, because in the books he's referred to as the one-handed shepherd. And he's a very old man, like this person here. So it just seems like the show really wants you to think that this is the Shepherd. He winds up becoming a prophet of doom and a big rallying figure for all these anti-Greens in the small folk here, but also anti-Rhaenyra as well. The books don't get into his history that much. They talk about some rumors about his supposed history, but it's kind of lost the time. There are a lot of characters like that. In Game of Thrones it's thought that the Shepherd was a member of the Poor Fellows group within the Faith Militant. The Faith Militant were a group that the High Sparrow resurrected during the time of the main show, Game of Thrones. Much later, they were the military arm of the Faith of the Seven, under the command of the High Septon. During periods when they were active. Right now, during the time of House of the Dragon, their organization is outlawed. Not the Faith of the Seven, but the Faith Militant itself. Here is the quick history lesson here. They consisted of two different groups, the Warrior Sons and the Poor Fellows. We saw both of those during the Game of Thrones show. When they came back, as the name implies, the Poor Fellows mostly consisted of the small folk who defended begging brothers like the regular members of the church, who you would see literally begging for donations to the church on the street. They defended pilgrims traveling from city to city. The other side of their organization were the Warrior Sons. They were the full-blown knights in armor who did a lot of the really big fighting when it was necessary. The reason why the organization was resurrected later in the timeline is because Tommen became king, fell under the influence of the High Sparrow, who got him to change the law to make the Faith Militants legal again. Their group goes all the way back to the original Undulls, when they invaded Westeros and brought the Fifth of the Seven with them. The reason why they're outlawed during the events of House of the Dragon is because of the first Faith Militant uprising, which goes all the way back to the time of Aegon the Conqueror Hades, his son who became king after him, and then King Maegor the Cruel. The Faith Militant had been pissed off at the Targaryens since the time of Aegon the Conqueror, because they really did not like his sister waving, or the fact that he was married to two women at the same time. The fact that he was married to two of his sisters just made it way worse. But because he conquered the 7 kingdoms of the 6 kingdoms endured. Technically, he was viewed as so powerful with blurring the Black Dread, his 2 sister wives with their very large dragons. Naturally, they didn't try to move against Aegon the Conqueror. They just kind of let it pass. Like, okay, fine, you're married to your 2 sister wives. But whatever. When his son Aenys became king, he wed his son, who was also named Aegon. Remember, everybody in the Targaryen family loves to name their son Aegon to his daughter, Aegon's sister, basically doing the same thing that his father Aegon had done, marrying brother to sister within the family. His daughter was named Rhaenyra, who Rhaenyra on the House of Dragons show is actually named for. After that happened, the Faith Middleton got really pissed off and tried to assassinate him. It was kind of the same situation with the mob here. Trying to kill Alicent and Helaena while she's in the middle of having her dragon dream here. Anytime it seems like she's spacing out mid-conversation or mid-riot, it means she's either having a waking dragon dream, or she's remembering a dragon dream she had. Because whatever event is happening, like the riot in this case, triggers her memory of that particular dream. Because Aemys was viewed as a weaker king. He chooses not to retaliate immediately against the militant with his dragons or marshalling an army to stop them. The City Watch was around then, but it wasn't until Daemon in House of the Dragon upgraded them that they became the Gold Cloaks. Aemy's aunt, Visenya, Aegon's sister wife. The woman that Rhaenyra was just reading about and Jace asked not to use as a model for her current path of the dance right now, had advised Aemys to destroy the Story Sept in Old Town. That was where the High Septon of the day had previously kept his home base before Aegon the Conqueror, in the building of the Sept in King's Landing. The 1st September, not the one that we saw them fleeing from during the riot here in episode 6. That's actually the 2nd September that was built in King's Landing. Visenya had told Aenys to retaliate against the faith militant by burning the story sept with his dragon Quicksilver, just like his father, Aegon the Conqueror, burned Harrenhal with Valerian the Black Dread. Reminder too, that Visenya was Maegor's mother. As you can tell, she was way stabbed here. That's why Jace was asking Rhaenyra to please not be like this. And you're like, please don't do that. Don't burn them all. Visenya was also Vhagar's original writer. Soon after the assassination attempt, Aenys wound up falling ill and dying. Visenya then took her dragon Vhagar to the east to bring Maegor back from exile because just like Daemon was living in Pentos in exile for a number of years. Maegor had been living in Essos for a number of years in exile. Maegor comes back, then agrees to fight the faith militant in a trial of 7, which is like a trial by combat, but both sides get 7 members in the last team standing is winner Maegor winds up winning that but barely survives. Goes into a coma for a month. When he wakes, he immediately makes a beeline with blaring the Black Dread burning the September of Remembrance, the main sept in King's Landing at the time, to the ground. Remember, that's not the September the fleeing from during the riots here. This is the 2nd September when Macau officially takes the throne from his younger cousin Aegon, sort of usurping the throne from him. Technically, he built the dragon pit, as you see here, on top of the ashes of that former sept that he had burned. Like a very big show of strength and dominance from the Targaryens. Like we have dragons. What can you do against us then for the remainder of Macau's rule? While he was still alive, he continued to fight many battles against the faith militant in the faith just in general all across Westeros. This is actually referenced by Rhaenys during House of the Dragon Season 1, when she's commenting on how the younger generation knew nothing of war because things had been so bad under Maegor. She's talking about all the wars that were fought amongst the realm. But the wars during that period were very different from the war that's happening right now. During the Dance of the Dragons, lots of people died during the wars that Maegor fought. But those were mostly wars of regular people against the Targaryens in their dragons. United Targaryens. Whereas now it's all about dragons versus dragons. That's why I say the war right now on House the Dragon is a very different type of war. Eventually, all those wars that make wars fighting take their toll on Westeros. So many people wind up dying that the entire realm starts to turn on him, and he becomes known as Maegor the Cruel. He does a lot of other really bad stuff to earn that name Maegor the Cruel eventually winds up dying. Suspected that the Black Brides conspired together to kill him themselves. When the young Jaehaerys claims the Iron Throne, he starts to earn his name the Conciliator because he's trying to bring peace with the faith of the Seven End. The wars that Maegor had started. Is part of the terms of that with the faith they had to disband the faith militant, which then became illegal, which is why they're illegal during the events of How It's the Dragon, because it's right after the time of To Harass. That's why it took so long for their group to come back during the original Game of Thrones series, and why the High Sparrow had to convince Tommen, the king of that time, to actually change the law so that they could bring them back. But even though they're illegal during the time of House of the Dragon, you still had people like the Shepherd who were secretly part of the organization or suspected to be part of the organization on the DL. During the show, they've shown how the condition of the small folk has deteriorated the last couple of seasons, suffering from the Dance of the Dragons. They got the blockade from Rhaenyra, starving them out even though she sent them food like it's her solving a problem that she herself created. The Greens, to boot, have also run out of money in the treasury. Like there's no money to actually go out and buy more food. Highgarden, which you would normally expect to send a bunch of supplies to take care of that, are in the middle of their own conflict, so they can't send any help. And just recently, Criston Cole probably did one of the dumbest things you could possibly do. No big surprise there because he is kind of an idiot. He paraded Melee's head through the streets. That was terrible for a number of reasons. They got into this during the actual parade itself in that previous episode. The small folk had thought of the dragons as gods. And that's how the Targaryens were able to stay in power for so long. Fear of dragons showing them a dead dragon took a lot of that fear away. So right now on the show, the small folk are starving. They're not afraid of the dragons anymore. And Aemon just locked them all in King's Landing because, according to the showrunner, he does not care about the small folk at all. Like they're not even on his radar. It's not that Aemon is trying to hurt the small folk out of spite or anything like that. It's more like he doesn't even consider their well-being. Like what small folk who cares about them? Rhaenyra and Mysaria just stoked the fires, pushing them over the edge. The full-blown riot recently. But that would have happened no matter what. Eventually. The Shepherd character here is one of the more outspoken, anti-Green anti-Rhaenyra members of the faith. Just anti-nobles just in general. After these events, he becomes a rallying figure for the small folk. The movement grows, the small folk begin to get more powerful. And without getting into spoilers, getting too far ahead of the story, eventually he does lead them to do far worse things than the riots. In this week's episode, way worse stuff. My early theory is they'll probably save those events for the end of Season 3 or maybe Season 4, depending on the timeline for Season 3, because I think the show is supposed to get 4 seasons. So the reason why Helaena has this jolt of the dragon dream, or the memory of one during this riot, is probably a reference to that major event that the Shepherd winds up leading later in the timeline, but just like the High Sparrow during the original show. First they just teased the character like they mentioned him. Then he becomes a much bigger figure in the story later on. So expect to see more from him. Or if they recast whoever winds up playing the character in Season 3. Generally that vision that Helaena would have seen, that dragon dream would be one of the worst possible things that could have happened to the family across the timeline, though. And that's not just the Greens, it's the entire Targaryen family, both the Blacks and the Greens. If we get some more Easter eggs for that in the last couple of episodes, I'll do more bonus videos talking about Helena's dragon dreams, just because they tend to give us new dragon dreams in almost every single big episode that she's in. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.